Hello everyone, welcome once again to Promise. This is Economics by Ngum Promise, and on the screen you can find my contact. Should in case you have any worry about the video, you can contact me or drop a comment right away. I will respond to. So, on that theory of income distribution, these topics you obviously see the topic in paper 2. That was under. Yes, you obviously see the question in paper 2. It's under section A, question 4. Yes, that's theory of income distribution. The reward factors of production. The reward to land, the reward to labor, the reward to capital, the reward to the entrepreneur. Profit, rent, interest, and profit, rent, interest, and wages. Okay, very first question we'll be talking about: for what reason should a trade union demand for an increase in the wages of its members? Examine the possible effects of such an increase. Okay, let's look at the interpretation. You are expected to define trade unions and wages. You know, trade unions simply the organization of workers or the coming together of workers to pursue to work for the betterment of the working conditions of its members, or to work for the interests of its members. While wages here, they are just the reward to a factor of production called labor, or it is a compensation for labor. Then after that, first part you give the reasons why trade union can demand for an increase in the wages of its members. Yes, why should trade union demand for an increase in members? And that is when there is an increase in productivity, when there's an increase in the cost of living, when there's an increase in profitability of the firm, and the rest. Those are the main factors that can cause trade union to demand for better or for an increase in wages. You are expected to give 4 points and explain. You give 4 points and explain. You've done the first part. Then the second part, you give the effects. Yes, you give the effect, both positive and negative effects of wage increase. What will be the effect in an economy? Positive effects and negative effects if there is an increase in wages. The positive effects, you talk about increase in the standard of living of the workers, to increase productivity and output. You also increase profit of the firm because they work more. They are motivated. Workers are motivated to work high by higher wages. You also talk about negative effects. When they talking about negative effects, it will lead to what? Cost push inflation, because the cost incurred by the firm will increase. It can also lead to what? Unemployment, because for the workers, for the employers to pay higher wages, they might need to unemploy others. It may distort price mechanism. Wage increase affect the reward to other factors of production. Those are some of the negative effects. Positive effect, you state at least 2 with explanation. Negative effect, you state at least 2 with their explanation. Define the rate of interest. Why are there so many rates of interest in an economy? Yes. Let's look at interpretation. You are expected to define the rate of interest and choose either the classical or the Keynesian theory to explain. The rate of interest is simply the price paid for the use of capital. Yes, the price paid for the use of capital, that's interest. So you choose either the classical theory or the Keynesian theory to explain this how the rate of interest is identified or is determined in an economy. So talking about the Keynesian, the rate of interest, let me use the Keynesian theory, which says that the rate of interest is determined by the demand and supply of money. The demand and supply of money. With the classical theory, they say that the rate of interest is determined by the loanable fund, by the demand and supply of loanable funds. Now, the classical theory says that what? The rate of interest is determined by the demand and supply of loanable funds. Choose any of these two, you explain them with their graphs. indicate them, illustrate them with their graphs. So after that, you give reasons why an economy will have more than one rate of interest. Why will an economy have different rate of interest in an have different rate of interest? Reasons, that is, we are talking about the determinants of interest rate here, the determinants of interest rate, the determinants of interest in an economy. That's what we are talking about here. And some of the points we talk about: the risks and the credit worthiness of the borrower, that the risks involved in borrowing, the presence of many financial institutions, the presence of many financial institutions, the presence of so we say, to what extent may an increase in the rate of interest influence the level of economic activities in an economy? Let's look at interpretation. You define the rate of interest. You explain how an increase in the rate of interest will influence these economic activities. What are the economic activities that we're talking about here? We talk about it will lead to what? An increase in savings. It will discourage production. It will also increase it also worsen the balance of payment debt situation. It will also slow down the rate of economic growth. It would reduce consumption as many as possible. Then you talk about the limitations of a high interest rate to influence the level of economic activities. Yes, as you can find them on the screen, you can pause the video and list and read it very well. So explain the loanable fund theory. That's another question. Explain the loanable fund theory of interest rate determination, and what are the effects of a fall in the interest rate in an economy. We are supposed to define the loanable fund theory and interest rate. The loanable fund theory says that the interest rate is determined where the demand for loanable funds equals to the supply of loanable funds. Loanable funds are funds that are demanded by entrepreneurs, yes, for investment. And the interest rate is, like I already said, the price paid for the use of capital. Explain with a graph the loanable fund theory of interest rate determination. Like I said, assume that after that you can explain the graph showing that it is determined where the supply of loanable funds equal to the demand for loanable funds. Then you talk about, you give both positive and negative effects of a fall in the interest rate in an economy. That's the second part already. You said positive effects, it will lead to a fall in the rate of a fall in interest rate will increase consumption. It will also increase the rate of investment, will reduce the rate of unemployment. Okay guys, like I earlier said, okay, suggest reasons why two workers of mobile telephone network MTN earn different wages. Yeah guys, I think this question is only found in this channel. You can check out the answers in Promecon's YouTube channel. Just go back to the channel itself and just check the various videos. You'll find the solution or the answer to these questions. So let's get to the next video. What do you understand by the piece rate and the time rate as method of reward for labor? As method of reward for labor, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the piece rate method? Okay, interpretation. You are expected to define the time rate, and this is just when workers are paid based on the length of time they worked, either daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, or yearly. Yes, that's what we call the time rate. And the piece rate is when workers are paid based on the quantity of work, irrespective of what the time that has been taken to complete their work. With the piece rate, they don't care how long you've taken to produce, but they are paying you based on the quantity of what you have produce. From there, you then give advantages, and you then give the advantages of piece weight system of wage payment. The advantages of the piece weight system of wage payment. Some of them include it leads to what? Hard work, because people will be working hard because they want to earn higher wages. We'll talk about what? Increased output. It will also lead to an increase in output. It will enable easy calculation of wages. So those are some of the advantages. So look for others. You give the reasons. You give three disadvantages of piece weight. You give three disadvantages of piece weight system of wage payment. Now listen, the question said give what are the advantages and the disadvantages of piece weight method, in bracket 8 plus 6 marks. Meaning that advantages is 8 marks and the disadvantage is 6 marks. Advantage being 8 marks means you're supposed to state 4 points and explain. Disadvantages being 6 marks means you're supposed to state 3 points and explain. So you say some of the disadvantages say it leads to what? The production of low quality goods. Workers just want to produce more. They don't care about the quality of the goods produced. It's talk about more careful workers may be penalized. Yes, workers are instead want to produce good quality, they might be penalized through what? A low amount of wages, or they might even be dismissed because they might think that they don't work hard. Meanwhile, they are just trying to make the products to have a better quality. It also leads to stress. Workers stress a lot because they want to earn high. They stress a lot. What are the characteristics that distinguish profit from other factor incomes? Explain the role of profit in an economy. Define profit and mention the other factors of income. Profit is simply the reward to an entrepreneur. Yes, the reward an entrepreneur. They say, what are the characteristics that distinguish profit from other factor income? What are the other factor incomes we are talking about? We are talking about rent, wages. We are talking about rent, wages, and interest. What makes profit different from these factor incomes? Give factors that make profit different from the other factor incomes like interest, wages, and rent. Those points, remember we are working on 8 marks, so you give 4 points and explain them. You say profit may be negative. No other factor income can be negative except profit. Profit fluctuates more than any other factor income. Perfectly true. Factors like wages will not be fluctuating, rent will not be fluctuating, and the rest. In fact, profit is the only factor income that fluctuates more than any other. So profit is a residual item. It's a residual item. Why other factor incomes are contractual? What do you mean? Profit is what is left after paying other factor incomes. Why other factor incomes are contractual? I mean that there's always an agreement between the employer of those factor incomes and those factor of production that this is what they are going to be paying them. Meanwhile, profit is not stable. Like, it is a residual. After paying them, what is left is what is considered as profit. Profit is the only factor income that can be zero. Yes, at the end of the day, you might make a zero profit. Like, you can have only a normal profit. You can only break even. That is possible with profit, but never to any other factor income. From there, now you give the role that profit plays in an economy. You are expected to give at least 6 points. Profit is a reward to those who bear the risks of uncertainty. Entrepreneurs, it is an indicator for potential investors. Those that want to invest, they tend to look for firms that make higher profit. So profit is very, very important to them. Profit also plays an important part in determining the allocation of resources. Yes, it determines what economic resources should be allocated to. It serves as a source of revenue to the government. Yes, it is a tax base. Profit is a tax base, which serves as what a source of revenue to the government. It indicates efficiency, and firms are making profit means that the firms are efficient. Those that are not making enough profit means that they are inefficient. It also serves as a source of funds for investment. At times, firms plow back profit. They do what we call plowback profit. Yes, it serves as a source of finance, a source of funds for their investment. Why is interest paid for the use of someone else's capital? 4 marks. Why do many interest rates exist in economy or in Cameroon. The first part explain what is meant by the capital and interest. Yes. From there, you give 2 reasons why interest should be paid on capital. Why you should pay interest on capital. You need to compensate for any future fall in the value of money. You know, if the value of money fall in future, you get to realize that the lender will lose. That is the debtor will lose. Why the creditor? No, the creditors will gain. Why the debtors will lose. Yes. And they also need to do what? To compensate for foregoing present consumption and savings. The lender ought to save or consume his capital or his money, but he decided to borrow or to lend. So you need to compensate the lender for foregoing present consumption. You also need to compensate the risks and the trouble involved in borrowing. The second part, you explain why many interest rates exist in an economy. You can see we already talked about it in the previous questions. Distinguish between economic rent and transfer earnings. With the aid of diagram, explain the determinants of the amount of transfer earnings for a factor of production. They can say you should determine the amount of transfer earnings or determine the amount of economic rent. The same thing. It all boils down to what? The elasticity of supply for the factors of production. The first interpretation, you are supposed to give the main difference or the difference between economic rent, also called abnormal profit, and transfer earning, also called normal profit or the supply price of an entrepreneur. Economic rent is simply the surpluses over and above transfer earnings, an extra amount earned by a factor of production over what he or she was expecting. While transfer earning refers to what? The minimum amount required to keep an entrepreneur in or a factor of production in the same line of business. That's why it is also called the supply price of an entrepreneur. From there, you are required to give the factors that determine the size of transfer earnings for a factor of production. It is all about elasticity of supply for that factor of production. You talk about the various forms of elasticity of supply: fairly elastic, fairly inelastic, perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, unit elastic. That's what we are talking about. So NV, be it transfer earnings or economic rent, the size are being determined by elasticity of supply or the factor of production concerned. So we talk about perfectly elastic, fairly elastic, perfectly inelastic, fairly inelastic. Let's look at the graph of fairly inelastic. After do that, you present the graph. If the elasticity of supply, or if the supply for that factor of production is fairly inelastic means that a greater portion of its reward will be what we call economic rent, while the lesser portion or the smaller portion will be called transfer earnings. As you can see, economic rent is greater than transfer earnings. But one good thing here, or one thing you must respect here, is the shape of fairly inelastic supply. That's what makes your graph to come out. The shape of fairly inelastic supply. So fairly inelastic. Let's also look at the graph. Or unit elastic, please. Sorry. Unit elastic, there's equality. That is the reward to the factor of production is shared equally between it is in equal proportions. That is, economic rent is the same as transfer earnings. That's just what the question was expecting from you. So guys, you can digest it very well. You might visit your book or whatsoever, a textbook or whatsoever, to understand this very well. So you explain and draw diagrams to illustrate all. The advantages and disadvantages of the government instituting minimum wage legislation. You're supposed to give the advantage and disadvantage of the government instituting a minimum wage legislation. So you define minimum wage legislation as a body of laws kept by the government which prohibits employers from hiring workers for less than a given hourly or daily or monthly minimum wage. That's the definition of a minimum wage legislation. From there, you give the advantages of the minimum wage legislation. Some of the advantages you talk about: workers are protected. Yeah, that's one advantage. Workforce motivation due to what? Higher wages, or you say increase in productivity. There's an improvement in the standard of living of employees. You talk about improvement in the rate of economic growth. Those are some of the advantages. Then you give now the disadvantages. Remember, it is 10 marks, so you give 5 each and explain. That's why you give at least 5 disadvantages of minimum wage legislation. Some of them it will lead to what? Unemployment due to what? The demand of less labor by firms. It can also lead to cost push inflation due to an increase in the cost of production. It can lead to what? Blank marketing. Yes, it can lead to blank marketing. Can also lead a minimum wage legislation also reduces what? The level of profit made by firms. Those are some of the disadvantages that are being brought about by the minimum wage legislation. Get it, guys? When we talk about minimum wage legislation, just simply referring to a case where the government institutes a minimum amount that employers should pay workers. We've come to the end. Come to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. I know that you've already subscribed, right? Yeah, I know you already subscribed to the channel. Yeah, I'm not force you again. But if you have not done, please subscribe, share, because you always testify the goodness of this video to more. Please share to your friends. Share to your friends. Let no one be left on which with this video. Like, comment if possible. Comment in other thing. So guys, see you in my next video. Bye bye. I wish you all the best in exams. I know you guys are going to be facing exams in less than no time from now. I wish you all the best. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck.